So a while ago I posted a video of how I made this cape ripple, and it was mostly designed to be just an overview of my process, showing someone else the essentials of what I did, but um, it's not very helpful as far as following along and making something out of it. So this time I'm going to record something that is hopefully a little bit more helpful for you guys. So here goes. Switch over to After Effects. This is the logo that I used for the original, just masks on a white solid. For this case, I'm just going to use these. So what I'm going to do is just copy this and put it in a new comp. So that way, I can just start where I left off. Right. So I'm going to call this comp logo. I'm going to number these in sequential order, so for those of you that's helpful to kind of follow along, this is step 1. Let's put this in the tutorial. Okay, now put that in another comp. I'm going to call this one outline. Alright, we're going to create this outline that happens along the outside. So first I'm going to duplicate, see on the top one, I'm going to add what's called fill. This I'm going to use yellowish, yellow. On the bottom one, we'll stick a fill on there temporarily, just so you can see what's happening. Okay, on the bottom we're going to use a matte choker. So what this is going to do is we're going to use it to expand the edges of where this alpha already is. So if we choke this in, it's just going to make it more frail looking. We'll come back. See how it just shrinks in from the outside? So what we're going to do is go the other direction. So we're going to go out. So we're going to go in the negative, so it gets a little bit thicker. So I'm going to do this to negative 100. If I can type, negative 100. And we're just going to bump up the iterations until it looks about where we want. So we turn this one back on, you can see how it got a little thicker. You can do more if you want a thicker outline, thinner. I think 4 looks okay for right now. Alright, change this color to black. And it's now on alpha. Great. Go back over here, drag our outline into a new comp. This one is going to be cape, but we're going to change this to something a lot bigger. Let's do 1500 by 2000. So this is going to be our actual cape. I know that's not the dimensions of a real cape, but for the sake of this, that's really kind of all we can see. Actually, it doesn't even need to be that long. So, by the way, I'm working to render this out at 1080p, so that's why I'm working with such large numbers. If you're working at something smaller than HD, you of course don't need to build it this big. Alright, so cape. Make a new solid. I'm going to make it red. Put this below. Alright, cool, we're done. Just kidding, that looks terrible. So now, we're going to make a new comp, 1500 by 2000. Call this Displacement Map. Displacement Map. Okay, now what we're going to do is make what is called a displacement map. A displacement map is a black and white two-dimensional image that we use to distort another image. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with what is called 50% gray, or just middle gray, which is exactly between black and white. So I just went in, typed my brightness just straight to 50, hit OK, and make it the same size, and OK. So if we were to go apply this to our cape composition, nothing would happen. There are a number of ways to go about doing this. I will show you two ways. One is slightly simpler and another one is a little bit more advanced. So here's the quick and simple version. We're going to add some fractal noise, put that on there, and then add fast blur. Okay, we're going to bump up the scale on this fractal noise. So fairly big. Let's go to 300. Good even. No, it looks too big. 250. Alright, punch up the complexity just to make it look a little crisper. And then, now for the fast blur, we're going to turn on repeat edge pixels. And we're going to soften this a lot. Like that. Quite a bit. Okay, so now we're going to go take this displacement layer and apply it to our cape. So what I'm going to do is make a composition, just new comp, 1920 by 1080. That's what I've been working at so far. I'll just make this a good 5 seconds even. Alright, get rid of that. Now we're going to drag our cape layer. Okay, now we're going to drag in our displacement map, put it directly underneath, and we're going to turn it off because we don't need to see it. Okay, now we click on the cape, go over to our effects, we're going to add displacement map to the layer, and immediately it looks really funny. We don't like that. What it's doing is it's using its original image, its own layer for the displacement, so we want to tell it to use the displacement map. And then change these two, the horizontal and vertical displacement to luminance. So if I turn this up a lot, you're going to see what's happening. So this is way too extreme for what we want for this. We want a really subtle effect. But as of right now, you know, this isn't animating. But you can at least see what is happening. So let's hop back over to the displacement map, give this a little bit of animation. Going to option click on the evolution to bring up the expressions, and we're going to type a fun one. So this is time times, let's do 50 right now and just see how this looks like. Do a really slow RAM preview because I am recording my screen. Okay, so there's a little bit of movement there, so let's just speed this up just so that you can see what's going on for the sake of what it is. So this is just a bunch of clouds that are evolving. Okay, now if we go back over to our comp, let's call this composite for now. And as if we drag through this, you can see that it's distorting. Doesn't look quite how we wanted yet, but it's a great start. The next thing what I'm going to do is we're going to hop back over to our cape. We're going to give this just a little bit of texture just so we can see the distortion a little better. So I have a linen texture that I have, just some stock fabric. Pretty much just drop it right on top. Let's go with multiply for right now. We can change that later if we like. Hit T, bring up the opacity, and we'll just drag this down just to lighten it up a little bit. Jump back over to our composite. Now we can see a little bit more of the texture that's going on. And this is distorting way too much. So I'm going to go back over here, put this at something low. So this will give us a much subtler effect. Much more subtle? Subtler? Whatever. Now to give this a little bit of perspective so that we can make it feel a little bit more 3D. I'm just going to turn on the 3D box, bring up a rotation, hit R on the keyboard, or you can just go through the twirl down and under transform, you'll find all the rotation things. So make sure you check the 3D box. And under the rotation here, we're going to drag this X rotation just into the negative a little bit. So it's kind of, this will just swing the bottom towards us. There we go. Slightly more cape-ish. We can even turn this distortion up a little more just so you can see it. Okay, So now here is my favorite part. This is where stuff really starts to come to life. What we're going to do is in our cape composition, we're going to add what I call the secret ingredient. What we're going to do is use our original displacement map inside of this comp to shade the brightness of this so it doesn't look so flat. So actually get some shading in here. Okay, for this we're going to start with multiply. Oh, where it is, there it is. This automatically gives us a lot more shading. It's a little bit too dark for me. So let's go add some levels. And we're just going to brighten these up a little bit, just so we can take just the darkest parts of those shadows. That's good. Now, I'm going to bring in another copy of this displacement. Okay, first let's go rename this. I'm going to call this shadows. This one will be highlights. Alright, I'm going to change this one to linear dodge. Way too bright, but a good start. Drop some levels on there again. This time we're going to darken this stuff. Oh, there's good. And then bring down the opacity just a little bit. There we go. So now what that's doing is just giving us a little bit of shading. So if we go back over here, because we're using the same image for both the displacement map and the shading, it should match up quite well. So if we go through and drag through this, it looked like we've got a little bit more going on. So it looks like we've got some 3D going, and that's just faking the shadows and highlights. And I don't like this really sharp edge that we have here. It just looks like a layer. Just a 3D layer edge. So to get rid of that, I'm going to make a new adjustment layer. There's a bunch of ways to do that. You can right click, new adjustment layer, or go to layer, new adjustment layer, or my personal favorite, command option Y. That's my favorite. Just real quick, adjustment layer, done. We're going to add turbulent displace on top. That's way too much, but it's a good start. It gives us a little bit more, kind of breaks those edges up a little bit. It gives us a little more difference. This one will also add an expression on the evolution. Time times, let's do something small, like 10. Just so it's moving a little bit. Okay, maybe a little more. Okay, we'll just do 50. Take this up. So there's a good start, and you can go in and fine-tune these values a little more to kind of find what you feel works good for you. Another thing that we can do to shape this cape a little more is to add a mesh warp. Let's get rid of that. Mesh warp. What this is going to do is give us some points that we can drag around to distort this manually. So we don't want this big of a grid. That's huge. So we can go do this to maybe 5 and 3. And we can even do 3 and 3. For right now, that'll work. So I'm going to take these bottom corners, swing them out. Let's take these ones out a little. Come back. Really not a whole lot of science to this. You just kind of find something that looks good for what you're doing. So that might be a good start. That at least gives us a little bit more of something to work with. Let's make some stars. Here's a fun, quick way to make stars. New solid. Doesn't really matter what color it is. We're going to add onto it fractal noise. I love this effect. You can pretty much make almost anything you want, at least as a base. So we're going to take this, shrink it way down, punch up the contrast, bring the brightness down, and there's a good start for some stars. If you want, we can add some smaller ones. We'll duplicate it, Command D, change this blend mode to screen so we can see through it, and then scale these even smaller, and that just gives us a little more detail. So this will be our stars. Put it on the bottom. Actually, I didn't think about when I did this, by doing this as an adjustment layer, that is going to distort the stars as well, and we don't want that. We don't want this jello-y effect happening up here. So what we could do is, instead of having these on a displacement or as an adjustment layer, copy them over here and then have it on that. And that way just this layer gets distorted. I don't know why I put on an adjustment layer in the first place. That was silly of me. So I apologize. Let's do a bit of color correction on this to make it look a little bit cleaner. Let's do curves. That's a great one. Let's darken this down a smidge. And saturation. Just take it out a little bit, so it's not as in your face. Call this color correction. Let's make a new adjustment layer and add some more curves. I'm going to make a little bit of a vignette. So let's add an ellipse. You can double click and it will create an ellipse around it. Change this to subtract. And change our feather to, like, I don't know, 300. Something big. Drag this down. Now we're just kind of darkening the corners. That may be a bit much. Darkening the corners of our image. Just a bit. Kind of cutting out our stars, but I suppose that's okay for this. Move this up. And that in. Somewhere along those. Vignette. I have no idea how to spell that. Oh well. Okay, so here we go. We've got a decent looking cape out of a displacement map, and it's being shaded by the luminance values of the original displacement map. We can even turn this down a little bit more. 60, 60. That might make it a little less. Might be a little less strong. Alright, and so there's a cape. As promised, I'll go back and show you a slightly more advanced way to do a displacement map. This is a little more involved than just the fractal noise with the fast blur on it, but the fractal noise works well. But if you want a little bit more control, and this is the technique I use for the example. Let's make a new solid. Make sure it's 50% gray. Now let's go up in the animation presets. There's one called Ethereal. And I'm going to delete the median and the tritone because we don't need that for this. So what this is doing is it's kind of creating some waves along this. You can see what's going on. If we bring up the keyframes, we can even delete. We can delete all of these and just keep just this preset. You can drop on the wave world straight from here if you want, but this one at least has some settings that I think work, kind of well for this one. Let's add a fast blur to that because that is way too sharp. Repeat edge pixels. Okay, now we're going to add another solid, 50% gray. Put this below. Turn off our original. And change this guy to screen. So that's just going to make the black go away. Bring this down a bit. So now you can see what's happening with those. Let's bump that up even more. Now if we go back to our composite, you can see what is changing. We get a little bit more of a ripple pulse coming through it. Oops. I'll show you what my original one looked like, so if you want to try and copy it. So this is what my original one looked like. There, I did kind of a double whammy with this one. I did some fractal noise that's really blurry, as well as the ethereal wave world kind of ripples on top of it. You could layer the different versions of this and get a pretty good effect. So we go up here, turn this to overlay. Now we can see both of them. We've got our fractal noise going and our wave. Let's turn this wave down even more. It's a bit too bright. So there's a slightly alternative way to do it if you'd like. So there you have it, a cape using displacement maps. Thanks for watching.